The phone camera shook as Karen pressed record, her face twisted with righteous fury. "You're trespassing on my property," she shrieked at the family, splashing in the crystal-clear lake. But as the police sirens wailed in the distance, a single document in the father's wet hand would expose a truth so shocking, so devastating, that Karen's world would crumble in 20 seconds flat. What she thought was her moment of triumph was about to become her public execution. The morning sun cast diamonds across Pine Lake's surface as David Martinez adjusted his daughter's life vest for the third time. At 8 years old, Sophia had inherited her mother's fearless spirit and her father's stubborn streaka combination that kept both parents on constant alert around water. "Daddy, can we swim to the big rock?" Sophia pointed to a moss-covered boulder jutting from the lake about 50 yards from shore. "Not today, Mia. Stay where I can reach you." David's voice carried the gentle firmness of a father who'd learned to pick his battles. He glanced at his wife, Elena, who was spreading their picnic blanket on the small patch of sand they'd claimed as their own. Elena looked up from unpacking their lunch, her dark hair catching the light. "She's been talking about this trip for weeks. I think she's more excited about the swimming than the 4th of July fireworks tonight." Their son Miguel, 16 and perpetually attached to his phone, looked up from his device long enough to roll his eyes. "Can we at least get in the water before it gets crowded? I don't want to deal with a bunch of tourists." David surveyed the lake's perimeter. Pine Lake was a hidden gem in the North Carolina mountains, accessible only by a narrow dirt road that wound through dense forest. They discovered it 3 years ago during a family camping trip and had returned every summer since. The pristine water, surrounded by towering pines and granite cliffs, felt like their own private paradise. "This is perfect," Elena said, settling onto the blanket. "No crowds, no noise, just us and nature." As if summoned by her words, the distant rumble of an engine echoed across the water. A pristine white SUV appeared on the opposite shore, navigating the rocky path with obvious difficulty. The vehicle stopped about 200 yards away, and a figure emerged, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair that seemed impervious to the mountain humidity. "Well, there goes the neighborhood," Miguel muttered, but his parents were already wading into the water with Sophia. The lake was surprisingly warm for early July, heated by the shallow, sandy bottom near the shore. David felt his shoulders relax as the cool water lapped at his chest. This was exactly what he'd needed after the brutal work week. As a construction foreman, he spent his days managing crews and solving problems. The lake offered the kind of peace that no amount of money could buy. Sophia squealed with delight as she discovered she could touch the bottom even 20 feet from shore. "Look, Mama, I'm swimming with the fishies." Elena laughed, the sound carrying across the water. "I see them, baby, but remember what we talked about, no touching the fish." Across the lake, the blonde woman was pulling items from her SUV with mechanical precision. A folding chair, a large umbrella, what appeared to be a cooler, and David squinted. Was that a camera with a telephoto lens? "Honey," Elena said quietly, moving closer to him in the water. "That woman is setting up some kind of photography equipment." David followed her gaze. The woman had indeed assembled a professional-looking camera setup, the long lens pointed. Directly at their section of the lake, a cold knot formed in his stomach. "Maybe she's photographing the wildlife," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The woman raised the camera, and even from a distance, David could see the lens tracking their movements. She wasn't photographing birds or scenic views, she was photographing them. "I don't like this," Elena said, instinctively moving closer. To Sophia, "Why would she be taking pictures of us?" Before David could respond, the woman lowered her camera and began walking along the shoreline toward them. Her movements were deliberate, aggressive, like a predator stalking prey. She wore designer hiking boots that had clearly never seen a real trail, and her expensive-looking outdoor gear screamed, "Weekend warrior." "Stay calm," David murmured to Elena, but his hands were already moving to gather Sophia closer. The woman reached the edge of the water directly across from them and cupped her hands around her mouth. "Excuse me?" Her voice carried clearly across the lake's surface. "You're on private property." David felt his jaw tighten. They'd been coming here for 3 years. He'd researched the area extensively, knew the property lines, understood the access rights. This section of Pine Lake was public land, managed by the National Forest Service, private property. the woman shouted again, this time raising her camera to record them. "I'm calling the police, Daddy." Sophia's voice was small, confused. "Are we in trouble?" The peaceful morning shattered like glass. David looked at his daughter's frightened face, then at Elena's protective stance, then at Miguel, who was now standing waist-deep in the water, his teenage bravado replaced by genuine concern. "No, sweetheart," David said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "We're not in trouble. We're exactly where we're supposed to be." The woman was now holding up her phone, clearly recording them. Her voice carried across the water with crystal clarity. "This is Karen Whitmore, and I'm documenting trespassers on my lakefront property. The police are on their way." David's blood ran cold. Not because of the threat, he knew they had every right to be here, but because of the name. Karen Whitmore? He'd heard that name before, in contexts that made his stomach turn. Alina grabbed his arm. "David, we should go. I don't want the kids to see this get ugly." But David was already wading toward shore, his movements purposeful and controlled. He'd spent years dealing with entitled property owners who tried to intimidate his work crews. This was different, though. This was his family's sanctuary being violated by someone who thought money and aggression could rewrite the law. "Kids, out of the water," he called over his shoulder. "Now?" As Sophia and Miguel reluctantly began moving toward shore, David reached their blanket and pulled out his phone. The screen showed 17 missed calls from the same number, a number he'd been dreading would call for months. Karen Whitmore wasn't just some random lake enthusiast with boundary issues. She was the woman who'd been trying to buy out his construction company, using increasingly aggressive tactics when he'd refused to sell. She was the woman who'd filed false complaints with the county about his work sites. She was the woman who'd somehow discovered his family's private retreat and had apparently decided to make it her battleground. The phone rang in his hand. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but somehow he knew exactly who it was. "David Martinez," he answered. "This is Officer Janet Powell with the Henderson County Sheriff's Department. We've received a report of trespassers at Pine Lake. Are you currently on the property?" David looked across the water at Karen, who was still recording, her camera now supplemented by what appeared to be a professional video setup. She'd planned this, every detail, every moment, carefully orchestrated to create maximum drama and humiliation. "Yes, Officer Powell. My family and I are swimming in Pine Lake, on public land managed by the National Forest Service. We have every legal right to be here." "Sir, the caller claims you are on her private property. She's provided documentation of ownership." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Officer, I need you to run a property search on Karen Whitmore. And I need you to check the National Forest Service boundaries for this area. I think you'll find that Ms. Whitmore's documentation is either fraudulent or she's deliberately misrepresenting the property lines." There was a pause. "Sir, are you refusing to leave the property?" "I'm refusing to be intimidated off public land by someone who's been harassing my family for months. We'll be right here when you arrive." David ended the call and looked at his family. Alina was wrapping Sophia in a towel, while Miguel stood protectively close to both of them. Across the lake, Karen was gesturing wildly at her camera, clearly narrating some dramatic version of events for her recording. "What's happening?" "Daddy?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling. David knelt beside his daughter, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people try to take things that don't belong to them, but we don't let bullies win, do we?" Sophia shook her head solemnly. "Good girl." David stood and pulled out a waterproof folder from their beach bag, the same folder he'd been carrying for 3 years, updated each season with the latest property surveys and access permits, because today, that lady is about to learn that some fights you just can't win. As the distant sound of sirens began to echo through the mountains, David opened the folder and pulled out a single document that would change everything, that Karen Whitmore had no idea existed. A document that would transform her moment of triumph into her most devastating defeat. The war for Pine Lake was about to begin, and Karen Whitmore had just made the fatal mistake of bringing a camera to a courtroom fight. The first police cruiser appeared through the trees like a metallic beast, its red and blue lights strobing against the green canopy. Officer Janet Powell emerged from the vehicle, a tall woman in her 40s, with the weathered look of someone who'd seen every kind of human stupidity the mountains could produce. Behind her came a second cruiser, this one disgorging a younger officer who immediately began surveying the scene with the keen interest of someone hoping for excitement. Karen Whitmore was already striding toward them, her camera equipment abandoned. In her rush to present her case, officers, "Thank God you're here. These people have been trespassing on my property for hours. I have it all documented." She thrust her phone toward Officer Powell, the screen showing a shaky video of the Martinez family swimming. "Look at this. They're treating my private lake like their personal playground. I've asked them repeatedly to leave, but they refuse." Powell took the phone, her expression neutral as she watched the footage. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and let me assess the situation. Where exactly are your property lines?" Karen's face flushed with indignation. "The entire eastern shore of Pine Lake. I have the deed right here." She fumbled in her designer bag, producing a folder thick with documents. "I purchased this property 6 months ago, specifically for the lake access. These people are clearly trespassing." Across the water, David was helping Sophia into dry clothes while keeping one eye on the unfolding drama. Alina stood beside him, her jaw set in the way that meant she was prepared for war. "You sure about this, honey?" Alina asked quietly. "We could just leave, come back another day." "No." David's voice was granite. "She's not just trying to steal our swimming spot, and I'm done letting her think she can intimidate people." Miguel, now wearing a t-shirt over his swim trunks, was recording the scene with his phone. "Dad, this is going to be epic. Wait until my friends see this." "Miguel, put the phone down," Alina said sharply. "This isn't entertainment." But David touched his son's arm. "Actually, keep recording. I want this documented from our side, too." Officer Powell was now examining Karen's documents, her brow furrowed in concentration. The younger officer had walked to the water's edge and was studying the shoreline with obvious confusion. "Ma'am," Powell said finally, "these documents show you own property on the eastern shore. But according to this survey, the property line ends approximately 50 feet from the water's edge. The lake itself and the immediate shoreline are National Forest Service land." Karen's face went white, then red. "That's impossible. The real estate agent specifically told me I was buying lakefront property. I paid $2.3 million for lakefront access." "You have lakefront access," Powell said patiently. "But you don't own the lake or the shoreline. Nobody does. It's public land." David chose that moment to wade into the water, the waterproof folder held high above his head. Each step was deliberate, calculated for maximum impact. He could feel Karen's eyes on him, could sense her growing panic as he approached the shore. Where the officer stood, "Officer Powell," David called out as he reached the shallows. "I'm David Martinez. We spoke on the phone." Powell nodded. "Mr. Martinez, I was just explaining to Ms. Whitmore that the lake is public property." "Oh, it gets better than that," David said, water dripping from his shorts as he stepped onto the rocky shore. He opened the folder and pulled out a laminated document. "This is a copy of the National Forest Service access permit for Pine Lake. It specifically designates this entire area as public recreation space." Karen snatched the document from his hands, her eyes scanning the official letterhead and stamps. "This, ... This can't be right. My real estate agent said." "Your real estate agent lied to you," David said simply. "Or maybe you lied to yourself. Either way, you don't own this lake, and you never did." The younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, if you were misled about the property boundaries, that's a civil matter between you and your real estate agent. But you can't claim ownership of public land." Karen's carefully constructed facade began to crack. "But I've been planning. I've bought this property specifically for..." She stopped, her eyes darting between the officers and David. You planned this, didn't you? You knew I'd be here." David's laugh was cold. "Lady, I've been coming to this lake for 3 years, long before you ever heard of Pine Lake. The question is, how did you know we'd be here today?" The silence stretched taut as the implications sank in. Karen had known exactly where to find them, exactly when. They'd be here. This wasn't a chance encounter, it was a carefully orchestrated ambush. I was just protecting my property," Karen stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "By stalking my family?" David's voice rose, 3 years of suppressed anger, finally finding an outlet by following us to our private family time. by trying to intimidate my 8-year-old daughter. Officer Powell's demeanor shifted, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. Ms. Whitmore, how exactly did you know this family would be here today? Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I patrol my property regularly. I saw them here before. This is the first time we've been here this summer, David said flatly. So unless you've been watching us for months, planning this little performance, you're lying. The younger officer was now taking notes, his expression serious. Ma'am, do you have any surveillance equipment on your property? Any cameras pointed at the lake? Karen's face went ashen. That's not. I mean, I have security cameras, but they're for protection. Protection from what? Powell asked. Families swimming in a public lake. David pulled out his phone and showed the screen to Officer Powell. 17 missed calls this morning, all from numbers I don't recognize, but all traced back to the same source. Someone has been calling my house, my business, even my kids' schools. Someone has been harassing my family for months. Alina appeared at his shoulder, having waited across with Sophia and Miguel. She's the one who's been trying to buy out David's construction company. When he refused to sell, she started filing false complaints with the county. She's been targeting our business, our reputation, everything. That's not true. Karen's voice cracked. I made legitimate business offers. Legitimate. David's voice was deadly quiet. You offered me 50 cents on the dollar for a company worth millions. When I refused, you started calling the county inspector every day with false complaints. You've cost me 3 contracts and nearly destroyed my reputation. Officer Powell was now looking at Karen with undisguised suspicion. Ms. Whitmore, I need to ask you directly, have you been engaging in harassment or stalking behavior toward this family? Karen's perfectly applied makeup was beginning to run in the mountain heat. I was protecting my interests. He wouldn't sell, so I had to take other measures. Other measures. The younger officer stepped closer. What kind of other measures? I hired a private investigator to look into his business practices. I documented his construction sites for safety violations. I researched his family's habits to understand his vulnerabilities. Karen's voice was gaining strength, as if she believed her actions were justified. It's called due diligence. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Elena gasped audibly. Sophia moved closer to her father, sensing the adult anger even if she didn't understand its source. You hired someone to spy on our family. Elena's voice was barely controlled fury. To follow our children, I needed leverage, Karen said, her voice now taking on a defensive edge. He was being unreasonable. I offered him a fair price for his company, and he refused. I had to find another way to convince him. David felt something cold and dangerous settling in his chest. So you decided to terrorize my family, to invade our privacy, to follow us to our safe spaces, to try to destroy the one place where my kids could just be kids. I wasn't terrorizing anyone, Corinne snapped. I was conducting legitimate business research. Officer Powell had heard enough. Ma'am, I need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. Karen's face went white. What? Why? I'm the victim here. They're the ones trespassing. You just admitted to hiring someone to conduct surveillance on a family without their consent. You admitted to stalking behavior and harassment. And you're currently on public land, making false claims of ownership. Powell's voice was professional but firm. You're under arrest for harassment, stalking, and filing a false police report. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Karen's composure finally shattered completely. This is insane. I'm a respected businesswoman. I own half the commercial real estate in Charlotte. You can't do this to me. I can, and I am, Powell said simply. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. David watched as Karen was led to the police cruiser, her designer hiking boots slipping on the rocky shore. 3 years of fear, anger, and frustration were finally finding resolution, but the victory felt hollow. His family's sanctuary had been violated, their peace shattered by someone who thought money and aggression could rewrite the laws of human decency. But as Karen was loaded into the back of the cruiser, David noticed something that made his blood run cold. Her expensive camera equipment was still running, still recording, and pointed directly at his 3 hours later, David sat in the Henderson County Sheriff's Department conference room. staring at a wall of monitors displaying the contents of Karen's camera equipment. Detective Maria Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, was methodically cataloging each piece of evidence with the precision of a surgeon. "Mr. Martinez, what I'm about to show you is disturbing," Santos said, her voice carefully neutral. "Your family has been under surveillance for far longer than you realized." The first monitor flickered to life, showing grainy footage of the Martinez family's house. The timestamp read 3 months ago, April 15, 2025. Sophia was visible in the backyard, playing on her swing set, completely unaware she was being watched. Alina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's our house. That's our baby girl." "It gets worse," Santos said grimly. She clicked to the next file. This was taken at Miguel's school. The screen showed Miguel walking out of Henderson High School, his backpack slung over his shoulder. A red circle had been drawn around his face in post-production, and a note in the margin read, "Leverage point number 1. David felt his vision blur with rage. "She was targeting my children." "Your entire family," Santos corrected. "Look at this." The next video showed Alina leaving her job at the mountain clinic. The timestamp showed it was taken on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks ago. Again, the red circle, the clinical notation. "Leverage point number 2. "How many files are there?" David asked, his voice barely controlled. 47 hours of footage, spanning for months. Santos pulled up a spreadsheet on another monitor. "Your home, your children's schools, your work sites, your wife's clinic, even your grocery store." She documented your entire family's routine. Alina was shaking now, her face pale. "This isn't business research. This is stalking at a criminal level." "It's about to get worse," Santos said. She clicked to a folder labeled Phase 2. "These files are from the past 2 weeks." The monitor showed the interior of what appeared to be a high-end office. Karen was visible behind a mahogany desk, speaking to a man in an expensive suit. The audio was crystal clear apparently. Karen had been recording her own meetings. "I don't want to buy his company anymore," Karen's voice said through the speakers. "I want to destroy it. I want to destroy him." The man across from her leaned forward. "Karen, that's not what we discussed. You hired me to facilitate a business acquisition, not to engage in, I hired you to get results," Karen interrupted. "David Martinez has cost me millions in delays on the Asheville project. His company holds the permits I need, and he refuses to sell." David recognized the man, now James Caldwell, a high-powered attorney known for his ruthless tactics. "What exactly are you proposing?" Karen's smile was cold. "I'm proposing we make his life so miserable that selling to me becomes his only option. I've already filed complaints with the county. I've had his job sites inspected daily, but it's not enough. Karen, I can't be party to harassment, or you can't be party to what you don't know about," Karen said smoothly. "I've hired a private investigation firm to document his family's patterns. I know where they go, when they go, what they do. I know his daughter's favorite playground. I know his son's after-school activities. I know his wife's work schedule." Caldwell's face went white. "Karen, you're describing stalking behavior. This could be criminal." "It's only criminal if I get caught," Karen laughed. "And I'm not going to get caught. I'm going to use this information to apply pressure at exactly the right moments. A complaint to child services when his wife works late, a call to his son's school about concerning behavior, a report to the county about unsafe work conditions that just happened to coincide with his biggest contracts." David felt Elena's hand grip his arm so tightly it hurt. On the screen, Karen was outlining a systematic campaign of terror designed to destroy their family's life piece by piece. "And if that doesn't work?" Caldwell asked, his voice barely a whisper. Karen's expression turned predatory. "Then I moved to Phase 3. I found their little family retreat lake in the mountains where they go to feel safe. I'm going to take that away from them. I'm going to make them understand that there's nowhere they can hide from me." The video ended the conference room fell silent except for the hum of the computers. Detective Santos finally spoke. "Mr. Martinez, this footage was recorded 6 days ago. She's been planning this lake confrontation for almost a week." David stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun, the same mountains where his family had sought peace, only to find themselves hunted like animals. "There's more," Santos said quietly. The The private investigation firm she hired, they've been taking photos of your children for months. Close-ups at school, at the park, at the lake last summer. Some of these images, ... double quotes, she paused. They're the kind of photos that could be used for very dark purposes. Alina made a sound like a wounded animal. She was building a file on our babies. Like they were ... like they were targets. That's exactly what she was doing, Santos confirmed. But here's the thing, she documented everything. Every payment to the PI firm. Every illegal surveillance operation. Every plan to harass your family. She kept meticulous records of her own crimes. David turned back to the monitors. Why? Why would she document her own criminal behavior? Because she never believed she'd get caught, Santos said. She thought she was untouchable, wealthy, connected, powerful. She thought she could terrorize your family with impunity. Santos clicked to another file. This is from yesterday morning. The screen showed Karen in what appeared to be her home office, speaking to someone off camera. It's happening tomorrow. I've confirmed they'll be at the lake. I've set up the cameras. I've prepared the documentation to claim ownership. By tomorrow night, David Martinez will be so desperate to protect his family that he'll sign over his company for pennies on the dollar. And if he doesn't, came a voice from off-screen. Karen's smile was chilling. Then I moved to phase 4. I have enough surveillance footage of his children to make their lives very uncomfortable. School administrators get nervous when they receive anonymous tips about inappropriate behavior. Child Services gets very interested in families that seem to have concerning patterns. The implications hit David like a physical blow. She was going to file false reports. Try to have our children taken away. It appears so, Santos said, but Mr. Martinez, you need to understand something. This level of premeditation, this systematic planning, this isn't just harassment or stalking. This is what we call criminal conspiracy. And with the involvement of the private investigation firm, it becomes racketeering. Alina looked up sharply. Racketeering? Like organized crime? Exactly like organized crime, Santos confirmed. She conspired with others to commit multiple felonies over an extended period. In North Carolina, that carries a potential sentence of 20 years to life. David felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. She thought she was hunting us, but she was actually building her own prison. There's one more thing, Santos said. She pulled up a final file. This morning, before you arrived at the lake, she made one last recording. The screen showed Karen in her SUV, applying makeup in the rearview mirror. Today's the day David Martinez learns what happens when you cross Karen Whitmore. I'm going to destroy his family's safe space, humiliate him in front of his children, and force him to understand that I own him now. She paused, checking her reflection. And the best part? I'm going to record every second of it. When this is over, when he's broken and desperate, I'll show him this footage. I'll show him how completely I've destroyed his life, how thoroughly I've won. Karen's laugh was genuinely disturbing. He thinks he's protecting his family by refusing to sell, but he's actually condemning them to a life of fear. After today, they'll never feel safe again. They'll know that I'm always watching, always planning, always one step ahead. The video ended with Karen stepping out of her SUV, camera equipment in hand, ready to begin what she thought would be her moment of triumph. Detective Santos turned off the monitors. Mr. Martinez, I've been investigating crimes for 15 years. I've never seen someone document their own criminal conspiracy. With this level of detail, she's given us everything we need to prosecute her for stalking, harassment, conspiracy, racketeering, and attempted extortion. David looked at Alina, saw the mixture of relief and residual fear in her eyes. How long will she be in prison? If convicted on all charges, conservative estimate would be 15 to 20 years. But given the severity of the crimes, the premeditation, and the targeting of children, ... Santos paused. She might never get out. Alina stood, her legs shaky. Can we go home now? Can we take our children home and know they're safe? Santos nodded. We've already posted security at your house and your children's schools. And Mr. Martinez, you should note the private investigation firm she hired is cooperating fully with our investigation. They're providing us with everything. Names, dates, payment records, all the surveillance footage. Apparently, they realized they'd been hired to commit crimes and want to. The Charlotte Observer newsroom buzzed with the electric energy of a breaking story. Investigative reporter Sarah Chen stared at her computer screen, reading the police report for the third time. In 15 years of journalism, she'd never seen anything quite like this. "Marcus," she called to her editor, "you need to see this. That arrest up in Henderson County yesterday, it's not just some lake dispute. This woman was running a criminal enterprise." Marcus Webb, a grizzled veteran of North Carolina journalism, rolled his chair over to Sarah's desk. "Talk to me. Karen Whitmore, 52, arrested for stalking and harassment. But here's the kicker: she documented everything. 4 months of surveillance on a family, plans to destroy their business. And get this, she's been doing it to other families for years." Marcus leaned forward. "How many others?" "Police are saying at least 6 families, but they think it could be more. All the same pattern. She identifies a business or property she wants, makes an initial offer, and when they refuse, she launches a systematic campaign of terror." Sarah pulled up Karen's business profile on her screen. She owns 43 commercial properties in Charlotte, 12 in Asheville, and God knows how many in between. Net worth estimated at over $50 million. And she was using that wealth to terrorize families. Marcus whistled low. "This is front-page material. It gets better. I've been making calls all morning. 3 of her previous victims are willing to go on record. They've been too scared to speak out before. But now that she's in custody," Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID. "This is one of them now," she answered, putting the call on speaker. "Mr. Davidson, this is Sarah Chen from The Observer. Are you still willing to speak about your experience with Karen Whitmore?" The voice that came through the speaker was shaky, but determined. "Yes, I need people to know what she did to us, what she's been doing to families like ours. Can you tell me what happened?" "She wanted to buy our family farm. Been in our family for 4 generations. When we refused to sell, she destroyed our lives. Filed false reports with the EPA, claiming we were polluting the groundwater. Had our property inspected monthly. Our children were followed to school. Our neighbors received anonymous letters claiming we were drug dealers." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. "How long did this go on?" 8 months. 8 months of hell. We finally sold to her for 1/3 of what the property was worth, just to make it stop, just to get our lives back. Mr. Davidson, would you be willing to testify if this goes to trial?" "Ma'am, I'll do whatever it takes to put that woman away. She's a monster, a predator, and if she's finally been caught..." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Are my children safe now? Are my grandchildren safe?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. "She's in custody, Mr. Davidson. She's not going anywhere." After the call ended, Marcus was already on his feet. "Clear your schedule. This is our lead story. I want everything timeline, victims, financial records, the whole damn thing." "Already on it," Sarah said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "But Marcus, there's something else. The family that finally stopped Hertha Martinez family. They're not just victims, they're heroes." Meanwhile, 60 miles away in Henderson County, Karen Whitmore sat in the interview room of the county jail, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her makeup long since washed away. For the first time in years, she looked her age. Detective Santos entered the room carrying a thick folder. "Ms. Whitmore, your attorney is on his way, but I thought you might want to see what we've found." Karen's voice was hoarse. "I want to call my lawyer. I want to post bail. I want to go home. I'm afraid that's not going to happen." Settling into the chair across from her, the district attorney has reviewed the evidence. "You're being charged with 15 felonies, including racketeering under the RICO Act. There is no bail for RICO charges." Karen's face went white. "That's impossible. I'm a businesswoman. I made legitimate offers for properties. If people chose to sell, that's their decision." Santos opened the folder and pulled out a transcript. "This is from your own recording. Made 6 days ago, quote, I'm going to use this information to apply pressure at exactly the right moments. A complaint to child services when his wife works late, a call to his son's school about concerning behavior, end quote." Karen's hands began to shake. That was taken out of context. "Here's another one," Santos continued, quote, "I have enough surveillance footage of his children to make their lives very uncomfortable. School administrators get nervous when they receive anonymous tips about inappropriate behavior, end quote. I wouldn't. Ms. Whitmore, You recorded 47 hours of yourself planning and executing crimes. You documented payments to private investigators for illegal surveillance. You kept detailed records of your harassment campaigns against multiple families. Santos leaned forward. You built the case against yourself. Karen's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. I worked my whole life to build my business. I came from nothing. I clawed my way up in a man's world. I earned everything I have by destroying other people's lives. By being stronger than them. Karen's voice rose. By being smarter, more determined, more willing to do whatever it takes to win. That's how business works. That's how life works. Santos shook her head. That's not business, Ms. Whitmore. That's sociopathy. The door opened, and James Caldwell entered, his expensive suit looking out of place in the Spartan interview room. His face was grim. Karen, don't say another word, he said immediately. Detective, I need to speak with my client privately. Santos stood. Of course. But Mr. Caldwell, you should know. The FBI has opened an investigation into your law firm's involvement in Ms. Whitmore's activities. They'll want to speak with you soon. Caldwell's face went ashen. As Santos left the room, Karen grabbed her lawyer's arm. James, you have to get me out of here. You have to fix this. Caldwell pulled away from her grip. Karen, I can't represent you anymore. The firm is severing all ties with you immediately. What? You can't do that. I can, and I am. You involved my firm in criminal activities without our knowledge or consent. You've exposed us to RICO liability. Half my partners are already talking to criminal defense attorneys. Karen's world was crumbling in real time. But you said you'd handle everything. You said you'd protect me. I said I'd help you acquire businesses legally. I never agreed to help you stalk children and terrorize families. Caldwell's voice was ice. Karen, you're on your own. As he left the room, Karen sat alone in the orange jumpsuit, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd done. Not just to the Martinez family, not just to the other families she'd terrorized, but to herself. Her phone calls to business associates went unanswered. Her assistant had quit. Her accountant was refusing to return her calls. One by one, the people who had enabled her empire were distancing themselves from the toxic fallout. Back in Charlotte, Sarah Chen was putting the finishing touches on her story. The headline read, "The Predator Next Door: How a Charlotte Businesswoman Used Wealth and Power to Terrorize Families." But the real story was just beginning. Because as word spread of Karen's arrest, more victims were coming forward. The mother, whose autistic son had been followed and photographed. The elderly couple who'd lost their retirement home to Karen's intimidation tactics. The young family who'd been driven from their neighborhood by anonymous threats. Each story added another. Layer 2, the portrait of a woman who had weaponized her wealth and used it to destroy lives for profit. A woman who had convinced herself that money gave her the right to terrorize anyone who stood in her way. The Martinez family, meanwhile, was finally at peace. David had taken Sophia and Miguel back to Pine Lake that afternoon, not to swim, but to reclaim their sanctuary. As Sophia played at the water's edge and Miguel skipped stones across the surface, David felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Genuine calm. Alina joined him on the shore, slipping her hand into his. It's really over? David looked across the lake to where Karen's abandoned camera equipment had been seized as evidence. For us, yes. For her, it's just beginning. As the sun set over Pine Lake, painting the water gold and crimson, David knew that Karen Whitmore's own recordings would soon be played in courtrooms across the state. Her victims would finally have their day in court. And the predator who had stalked from the shadows would face the full weight of the justice system she'd spent so long believing she was above. The lake was quiet again, but this time the silence was permanent. Karen Whitmore would never threaten another family, never stalk another child, never use her wealth as a weapon against the innocent. She had documented her own downfall with the same meticulous precision she'd used to plan her crimes. And now, those documents would ensure she'd never hurt anyone again.